Hello, my name is Cody Deegan, and I'm an artist. Today I'm going to talk about drawing hands. So this is one method that I use sometimes for drawing hands. I'm going to start by drawing a square. When I'm drawing a square, I want to make sure that my vertical sides are parallel, my horizontal sides are parallel, and I also want to try and get the length of each side the same. So if I'm unsure if my sides are all the same length, I can take a measurement, line up the tip of my pencil with one side, and then capture the measurement with my fingers, hold it there, and I can see I'm pretty close. So I've drawn a square. Now what I can do is I can establish the length of the longest finger. I'm going to go ahead and use this same measurement, the height. I'm going to come up. And I'm just going to make a little construction mark right there. Going to double check it. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I've got a square. I've marked my longest finger using the height of the square. Next, what I'm going to do, I'm going to find the vertical center of the square, basically cutting this in half. Give myself a little bit of a construction line right there. All I'm doing is marking the center, and I'm using this so that I know to come over a little bit. So I'm going to come over like that. How far over? Maybe about a quarter. Doesn't have to be exact. And then from here, I'm going to draw a line at an angle down to this side, and then one over down to this side. Well, where at? I would say between a quarter and a third. Again, doesn't have to be exact. Let's just do something like that. So then I'm going to draw a line here and here. What do these represent? Well, on a hand, we've got the knuckles going at an angle this way up to the middle finger, and then it starts to slope down over here. So that's what these lines represent. So next I want to do a line from here and bring it down and create the width for the wrist. Same on this side. How far do you come in? That's something you can decide for your character. If you want thin wrists, thick wrists, I'm just going to do something very general. This is the back of the hand. So now I'm just going to bring a line up from this point here, bring this up to this point here, and this will represent the middle finger. And then from here, I'm going to come up, but I'm going to angle in a little bit. This will be the index finger. I'm just going to bring it in, and I'm not going to bring it up as high as this one. The index finger is a little shorter. And not so much that the finger is shorter, it's that it's sitting on a down slope. So I'll just make a little end construction line right here. Then I'm going to start over here, bring another line for this fourth finger. Again, I'm going to angle it in a bit, just so that I have a nice relaxed pose. I can spread these out if I'm going to have the fingers in a different position. So let's bring this one up and then go somewhere in between here to get the ring finger. Go ahead and bring it up, and I'm going to make mine a little smaller than my index finger. And then you'll notice the last finger is quite a bit shorter. So maybe I'll end it about right here. Then what I'll want to do is divide these lines in half. Roughly, just to get a location of these first joints. And then for now, I'm not even going to worry about these joints here. So this kind of creates this kind of shape here. It's like a curve with an apex on the middle finger. So with that in place, going back to the square, this top line of the square, I'm going to start here on this point And I'm going to draw another curve that kind of matches these two and ends right here. And I'm going to draw this lightly. This is a construction line. And then I'll explain really quick what this is for. So these two lines are for the orientation of the knuckles. This little construction line here is for the webbing of the fingers. So if I open my fingers up, I can see the webbing, and notice how much further up the webbing is compared to the knuckles. So that's what this line is for. Now when you're drawing fingers, you should notice that there is a space down here at the base between them when the fingers are apart. That space disappears when the fingers are closed. So next, I'm going to put in a triangle for the thumb. Notice how this lower line is a bit longer than the upper line. And the angle here is much steeper than the angle here. So I come off of this line at a steeper angle this way. To place the thumb, I'm going to use another construction line. I'm going to look at this joint here on the first finger, and I'm just going to come down below it, and I'm going to make a little construction mark right here. In a relaxed state, this is representing where the length of the thumb lines up against the index finger. Here's my middle joint, and I can come down a little bit, so that's what I've done here. I've located my middle joint roughly in this area here, and then I've just come down a little bit. Now, if I'm going to extend out the thumb, I can then use this mark here as a guide. And I can come off of this mark with an arc like this to help me better place the thumb. Now the thumb I draw in two sections. I can draw a construction line for the first section coming up, and it's going to be a little bit longer than the second section. So I can come up a little more than halfway between my baseline and my arc. So I'll go ahead and stop it right there, and then I can orient the second section either angled in or angled out, depending on the hand pose. So since I'm just doing a relaxed hand pose right here, I'll just angle it in a bit. I'm going to add a rectangle down here at the wrist. And then this can attach to the arm. I'm just going to draw basic elongated rectangles for the fingers. And notice that the end is a little bit more tapered. It's a little smaller in width than the base. These fingers are very close together, so I'm going to have them touching at the base. Since they're so close together, not really going to see that gap in between them. And I have to fine-tune these as I draw, because as I draw them, I might end up drawing one too thin, one might look too thick, so that's why I'm being real sketchy with this particular stage in the process. So now just look at these, make sure they look pretty good, pretty consistent. They all taper a little bit, they're a little bit fatter at the base, and their width is all similar in size. So then the thumb, I'll come up on this side, go to the end, and then this point right here I'll come down a little bit. And then notice I've just drawn a basic S curve for the thumb. So the first half of this curve is concave and the second half is convex. And then I usually have to fine-tune this a bit to get it to look right. And then if there's any space in between these fingers where this construction line is, that's where I can put in some little concave curves for the webbing in between the fingers. And then if I want to do fingernails, I'll come up to the ends of the fingers and I can just draw little squares that are tapered here at the bottom. And then since we're seeing the side of the thumb, I'll start near the end and do an angled line in like this. And then I'm going to bring it to the halfway point of this line right here. I can do a curved line like that. So this is a construction frame for a hand. So at this point, now I could go in and start contouring it, taking it to a finish. For example, here on the thumb, this is a straight line, but what I might want to do is add a little bit of curve right here. Right through there. And then I can add a little bit of a hill right there. To represent where that joint is. Maybe add just a very subtle convex curve through here as it comes up to the next joint. And then round it and drop sharply towards the nail. And do some cleanup as I go. And the nail, I'll give a bit of a convex curve. This webbing right here in between the thumb, I'm just going to give it a bit of a curve. So it's not such a straight line. Maybe curve this a little bit like that. So what I'm doing with these contour lines, it's very subtle, but I'm breaking it up into sections. So this section right here is where this pad that sits under the fingers is. So I'm just bulging it out just a little bit on the side. Then I'm going into this section of the finger here, and I'm doing the same thing, giving it just a subtle bulge until it gets up to the joint. And then I got a little bit more of a pronounced curve around that joint. And then I go up into the next section, which I draw the same way, very slight curve. And then bulge it out as it comes to the fingertips. And I can round the tip, and I'll basically do the same on this side. And then down here, I could make a note of where the knuckle is. And it might be helpful too, because these knuckles, I'm going to align them in the center of the fingers just with ellipses. I can orient them so the apexes of these ellipses, I can orient them with construction lines that come down to the wrist. So for example, this one's going to be more at an angle like this. This one will be more at an angle like this. I'm going to attach this curve here. I'm just going to S curve right around this wrist a little bit. And note too on this thumb, this is stylized. I mean, if you look at a thumb, it doesn't do this. It doesn't have that S curve. So if you want to draw this more realistically, you would tuck this in and then come out this way with the curve, reverse the curve like that. It just depends on what type of style you want to add. So I've got this construction line for the pad right here. You can see that it bulges out on the outside edge as well, same as right here. So from here to here, I can just add a little bit of a convexness to that curve. I actually want the curve to kind of round a bit around the knuckle, like that. So the apex of this curve is lower. I had it up higher. And then from here, this outside edge, can curve that a bit. And concave curve right through here at the wrist. All right, now to draw the other side of the hand, we're going to use the exact same process. I'm going to draw a square. Use the height to give me the length of the longest finger. I'm going to find center. And I'm going to bring this construction line for the center. I'm going to bring it down to about halfway. Half the distance down on this square, and I'm going to make a little construction line. You'll see why I do that in just a minute. So then I've got my center line. I'm going to come over just a little bit, give myself a little mark there, and then I'm going to do the same thing. Come down just a little bit, maybe between a quarter and a third, and create two angled lines like that. Then I'll come down and taper the ends to create the wrist. I'll go ahead and add a rectangle box here for the wrist. I will bring the middle finger up, the index finger a little shorter, third and fourth fingers. I'm going to angle down, create the triangle here for the thumb. So far everything's identical. I'm going to mark the center points for the joints. Now on this side of the hand, since we're looking at this side, these marks at the joints are a little bit lower than the marks for the knuckles. So after I get these in, I may adjust them. I may bring them down just a little bit like this. Then, using the top of the square, I'm going to put in that curve that marks this pad under the fingers. And since we're not going to see knuckles on this side, I can go ahead and do the same thing like this. It's basically just an offset curve that follows that one I just drew. We got to get this big palm pad here and the other one on this side. So that's where this center line comes into play. This divides up the square in half, and I brought it halfway down. Well, now what I want to do is I want to come over a little bit this way. And I'll just draw a straight vertical line down to the wrist like this. And then I'm going to connect it up here to this point. And then I'll connect the other one to the inside base of this fourth finger, like this. I'm going to come down a little bit for my thumb length, give myself an arc. First section is a little longer than the second section. I'm going to bend it the other way this time just to demonstrate that. Even though I have this pad drawn in place, I still want to bring the fingers down to those first sloped lines that I drew to help ensure that the base of them is the right width and they all fit correctly on the hand. Come down a little bit here. And this time my S curve will be a little more gradual, like this. Now I can go ahead and erase everything underneath this pad here. So I'm trying to stylize the fingers a little bit here. You can see on my contours, I'm doing a basic convex curve here on the end and then at the base, and then connecting them with a subtle concave curve right near the joint. So convex, slightly concave, and then going back into convex like this, and the whole while trying to taper to the end and curving that there. And then on these fingers, more on the edges, on the outside, the inside, I'm being a little bit more curvy, a little bit more apparent with the curves as opposed to the outside edge, which is a little more subtle. And then notice here on these two, I'm not joining the sections with a concave curve. I'm actually going the opposite direction to try and give some form to the joint, the knuckle. So just trying to get a little bit more angular on the outside edge. And then more curvy on the inside like this. And then can't really do that with the middle finger, I don't think, to make it look good, simply because it's just dead center. Same with this finger here. Let's go ahead and look at a side view of a hand. Instead of a box, I'm going to do a rectangle. But I'm going to make it much thinner because this is a side view. And then let's make the top shorter than the base. We've got a shape like this. Now we can still use the height to give us the longest finger. And then just from this point here, I'm going to angle down a bit. And let's go ahead and split this in half, roughly, and maybe angle it again, just to give a little bit of variation. So we'll do a line like this, halfway, and then like this. And then I'll just finish this with some rectangular shapes for the fingers, like that. And then notice I didn't connect here. That's because to me that looked like that would have been too wide. So I'm going to adjust the width on my initial shape. For the triangle, I'm I'm going to connect like this. I'm going to bring the thumb up pretty close to this joint here. When the hand is pretty straight like this, we can see that the end of the thumb does come pretty close to this joint. But these metacarpal bones in here in the hand, those can change their angle. When they angle back like this, that pulls the fingers back. That changes the alignment of the end of the thumb in relation to the finger. So keep that in mind as well. The thumb's not always going to line up with that point. So for now, I'm going to draw a straight line like this. And then here's halfway. I'm going to come a little bit further than halfway so that the lower section is longer than the upper section. Give myself a little construction line there. Now the way the wrist connects to the arm from the side view, instead of being a rectangle that comes straight down like this, we're going to angle it a bit. From the side, it's a little bit offset on the wrist. Some box shapes to represent the thumb. Right here at this point, I like to do a short, steep line and then a longer, gradual line like this to kind of represent the knuckle. And then I'll come across like this. Right there. And then coming just straight across here, a little construction line. This is going to represent that pad underneath the fingers, this one right here. So I like to put that in this way. I'll just round that. So then I get the knuckle and the pad in the same shape. And then this also helps demonstrate how that pad or the webbing of the fingers reaches further up than the knuckles do. And it is good to note that when you look at a joint on a finger, if you look at the underside crease here and then the location of the apex of the knuckle, look at them in relation to each other. They're angled. They're not straight across from each other. They're angled. So the knuckle is further forward than the crease. So if I'm going to do a crease, I can draw a construction angle like this to help me place the knuckle better. And then I'm just going to do a shape like this. So it's a curve that slopes up towards the tip like this. And so this is a bit of a stylized representation, simplified version of the fingers. Again, the underside is more curved. Long, subtle, convex curve. Short, subtle, concave curve. Followed by another long, subtle, convex curve. Rounded on the end. Convex from about here to here. Starts to round back up into that knuckle. And then the knuckle kind of spans this length here, and it's basically this same shape here. It's straighter and longer in the back, and then in the front it slopes a little steeper and is a shorter line like that. And then we bring that gradually into a very slightly convex contour line right through there, up to the knuckle. And we repeat. And then for the back of the hand, I like to give just a very subtle curve like this. And I'm trying to connect all these different sections with a nice smooth transition. Subtle concave curve right through there. I even round, maybe I'll round the knuckle a little bit so it's not so angular. Smooth out any angularness if that's what I'm going for. Sometimes I'll exaggerate the angularness depending on the type of character. And then I'm just going to flow up into the arm. Thumb, it's going to taper out, come back in, a little wider at the tip, and same thing for the other side. And then I want to round out the pad right through here. And maybe there'll be a very slight, again, this same knuckle shape, long then short, but very subtle right through here to represent that little joint. Come to about halfway here to get the thumbnail, maybe a little less. I usually draw it, look at it. If it looks too long, I'll shorten it. About the center of this knuckle, I can come over roughly to about here. I'll do a slight little S curve like this for the webbing in between the thumb. And that'll cross over this pad here. And then I can erase everything behind it like this. Tip of the finger, I'm going to go ahead and do a nail like this. And notice I haven't been drawing that last joint on the finger. That's because I'm just trying to keep things simple. And it's a style choice. Let's start adding a little bit of life to these hands. So let me start with a square again. Come up for the longest finger. Find center. This time I'm going to come over a little bit this way. Change things up a little bit. Draw my angle line there. Draw my angle line there. Bring this square down a little bit. Looks a little short. And then I'm going to angle down and angle down to where it looks pretty good. There's the base for my hand. I'm going to come down with the center line to about halfway there and then come over a little bit and plot in my pad. Come over to there. This one's going to come over roughly over there like that. Get the top of my pad going like this. Let's go ahead, instead of drawing a straight finger, let's give it a little bit of life. So I'll come up halfway and then I'm going to change direction a little bit. Just like that. I'm going to get in my triangle for my thumb. Let's do the index finger. It's going to come down a little lower. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to bring it over halfway and then change direction a little bit. Like this. And then I've changed my mind about the middle finger. Let's not have it out. I'll mark the thumb. I'll come down from this joint a little bit. Give myself an arc for the thumb. And I'm going to come out little above halfway, and then I'm going to change direction on the thumb like this. And then since this is the palm side of the hand, I'm going to bring this line down a little bit for the crease on the finger. So this is going to be more like this. I'm just going to put in some rectangles to hold their position. I'll get this first joint. But what I want to do is I want to fold the fingers. So the fingers are going to fold like this. And I'm going to bring them towards the big palm pad right here. So let me get this pad in place. It'll sit in there like this. And as I roll the fingers, this pad will squish and change size. We'll see how much of it we see. But I'm going to bring the fingers down to the pad right here. And I'm going to follow this curve like this. Give myself a construction line. And then let's do this finger here. And then let's make the next section a little shorter. And it'll sit in here like this. And then the next section a little shorter, and it'll come across like this. And then let me finesse this a little bit. Do a little bit of cleanup. Get a box for the wrist. And then I'm going to come down a little bit. Get that thumb in there like this. All right, so there's that pad, that finger pad. It's going to sit in there like this. So long curve through here, a little fatter down at the bottom. And then this curve right through here for the pad, finger pad. Same thing, the inside of this finger is more curved. Convex, concave, convex. And then on the outside edge here, I'm going to do convex, and then I'm going to give just a little bit of a hint of a knuckle. Bring that right into the pad right there. Very good. So after I've drawn this, it looks to me like this finger is a little short. So I'm checking the measurement of my box again. And I'm adjusting the height of that longest finger. And to me that tells me I can make this finger a little longer. I'm going to bring it up to here like that. That would put the center point roughly about there. I think spending some time with these construction methods, although a bit tedious, is very helpful, because then you can start loosening up after a while and not being so rigid. For example, rather than getting all my measurements all perfect and trying to get everything just right, I can start getting a little more sketchy with things. Now notice here I'm doing the exact same thing I've been doing, but I'm just being a little looser so I could draw a little quicker and hopefully get a little bit more life into the design. Now let's talk about when you're drawing hands in different orientations and perspectives. So here I'm drawing a cube that's going away from us. Connect it up to a wrist like that. Get that offset plane. Still going to get my triangle in there for the thumb. You got to remember that the hand curves. If we're looking at it straight on, it's not a block like this, where the fingers attach. It's more like this.